Hey everyone, welcome back to the It's a Mind Game podcast. My name is Jade, and today I'm back with my lovely friend Jacqueline, and we're here to explore further into part one of what was compulsive exercise. So, first of all, welcome back, Jacqueline. I'm so excited to have you here once again.
I'm so excited to be here again too, Jade. We definitely needed a part two on the back of the last conversation. So I'm so keen to be able to expand on that.
Yes, and I think because we covered so much in, I guess, the context of how easily we can slip into compulsive exercise behaviors and how pure and good the intentions can be at the very start. And then it's a bit of a slippery slope to what can lead to sort of shrugging your shoulders, going, how did this happen? And how do I get out of here because I don't like it anymore? And I think it was beautiful how we were sort of accommodating to the emotions that sort of make up that whole journey. But then we were excited to talk about, well, how do we get from that place of, I have the awareness, I have knowledge on how to correct this, perhaps I'm seeking support for it or I'm contemplating it, but what is it exactly that I should be aiming towards? What's this goal? Because I've gone from needing almost like a to-do list or, a schedule to tick off. And now my goal isn't specific, like this idea of free movement or intuitive movement, or what does it mean and how do we get there?
So important to have the awareness of where we're going, or a sense or a flavor of what that will be like to support us in getting there. Otherwise, I think it's a lot like structured eating, in that people can just get stuck with that scaffolding because it's safe and they know maybe they don't want to go back to the way that it was before, but it's still not, it's limited in that they don't have a sense of agency with that part of their life. And to me, that's the most exciting part of moving fully through these experiences, is to really be reattuned to your body and to be confident with the decisions you're making and really know the place they're coming from and be in celebration of that.
So that idea of, I guess, connection over structure is sort of the priority of what we're moving towards. If you to describe to someone what it would be to, like, your main outcome is like you want to have intuitive movement, you want to be able to make decisions about exercise on the day, on the spot, based on emotionally how you're feeling, physically how you're feeling. But if you were to sort of almost like sales pitch it, let's say, what is it?
Yes, it's such a good question. I think succinctly, it's a relationship. It's being in relationship and responsiveness to the cues of your body and the experience of your body, rather than the dogmatic cognitive idea of what we want to impose and where we're going. And that can even be co-opted with a false sense of like mindful movement or ideas along, like, I think it can get mismarketed sometimes, intuitive movement, or the idea of doing it for your mental health, or the like the well-being industry can have some interesting ideas contributing to that, because it sounds a lot safer. But just like a lot of sneaky parts of diet culture, it kind of gets in there and ultimately still tells you that there is a correct endpoint, there's a correct decision to be made, and anything that's formulaic in that sense, I would say, has a bit of a red flag around it. So what we're wanting is for someone to be in a place where they even had structure in their day, where they knew they wanted to fit movement into their day because that had some value for them, but they realized that the activity they had planned didn't feel that appealing by the time they got there, and they were able to choose a different activity instead, or even sometimes not go into activity, and not even maybe go into a movement focused session in the way they wanted to be with themselves in that time. And it becomes a really protective skill set for the long term. It's one of the really important pillars of creating an effortless, sustainable recovery and thriving experience of being healthy, as loaded as that word can be, of being supporting yourself and protecting yourself and getting all the benefits that we know might come with that, in a way that isn't interrupted with ideas that aren't your own.
You brought up two really important things that I can't wait to dive into. And one of them is that idea of mindful movement, which is a bit of a buzzword. And obviously, there is some very good evidence to suggest mindful movement is helpful. And that if you are feeling a little bit stressed out or you're caught up in your head, that, you know, going out for a walk or doing some yoga can actually be really, really helpful. But there is the fine line of, and I guess that's where it comes down to free will and choice, which is what you later said, that you might have had an activity planned later that day, the next day, but by the time you get there, you might feel indifferent about it. So let's say I've got a really busy day tomorrow, so I've blocked in 30 minutes of yoga because I know that's normally how I can just shut down, reboot. It's exactly what I need. And the intention behind it 24 hours prior is that's really going to help me. Right. I look forward to it. It's going to mix up my day, you know, tick, 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 I guess. But let's say tomorrow comes around. It's not only busy, things aren't going to plan. I'm about to pull my hair out, but I'm sitting there looking at this 30-minute block that's soon approaching. And the reality is, I'm probably better off spending the 30 minutes to send the extra email, make the extra phone call, and actually chop off the workload and be done with it, versus force myself to do this restorative movement because that was the deal. You said you're going to be stressed out and you're going to go do yoga. And the reason I'm being a bit dramatic with the context of it is because sometimes, and I'm just going to throw a bit of a curveball in there, that this idea of balance can be toxic as well, because I truly believe, and this is a new evolution of mine, is that no, we need to be living in harmony, which is, at the time when I made that plan, there was a certain play out of the day. By the time I got to my 30-minute yoga block, it wasn't the same day. It's a completely different day. And I guess that intuitive movement or lack of compulsion and doing what you need rather than what you planned is being in the position to go, okay, yoga normally calms me down, sets me straight, grounds me, does all those wonderful things. But on this very day, in this very moment, you know what? I'm better off just not doing the yoga. I'm better off doing, what do they say? Eat the frog. I'm better off doing the tasks that are bagging me down so that I can just move past them. And perhaps later on, before dinner, after dinner, maybe if I happen to have 30 minutes, I might do it then when my mind's actually calm and I'll enjoy it. Or it's simply a tomorrow. It's just going to be a better time to do it tomorrow.
Absolutely. I love that example so much because it really beautifully illustrates that idea of, you know, because yoga could have all those assumptions of, but that is more nurturing, or it is more supportive, or that would be a good decision for my mental health, or feels more in line to recovery. But I mentioned in our last conversation on this, I have seen anything be used compulsively, everything be used. It's less about the media almost that we're engaging with, and so much more about the intention, because you could still have an ideal that's imposing on you of how often you should do yoga and how hard you should push yourself in that experience. But also, more importantly, it takes away from the relating part of the relationship. It's like if you were with a friend that was telling you, like, oh, I know when we were texting, we said we're going to talk about this topic, but I don't really feel like talking about it today. And if you were sitting there with them going, that was the plan, you probably were going to talk about this, like, how would they feel? Like they're being overridden, they're being dismissed. Yes. You're not relating to them and picking up on the data available in that moment. You're sticking with an ideal of how you thought that conversation was going to pan out and what you thought that interaction was going to be about. So in the same way, when we meet our body in the moment and it says, oh, don't actually feel like this, and it maybe sometimes just to play devil's advocate, it might be we planned on doing something slower and our body actually wants to move more. Like it could look like that sometimes as well, but we would be shutting down that and saying, well, that must be wrong and it must be this that I want, and that would be the correct choice. And there very much is, I don't want to be taking that off the table for somebody at all, because I think that very much can be part of building a bridge into different behavior in the way that structured eating might be in somebody's eating recovery, that you can't say to someone that's had disordered eating, we'll just intuitive eat from tomorrow, because their relationship to their body isn't attuned enough to be able to pick up on the cues to do that safely. And they can't not be just guessing, I think I would be feeling like this now, or I think this kind of food might appeal to me. So offering them that transition is a much more supportive thing. And so we can play and experiment with all of this, and it can be lighthearted, and there can be a gentler way of doing it so that we don't feel like it's always pathologized, or it always has to be mean something devastating about us if we get it right or wrong. But just to know that there is something beyond that place. That's what's really important to me for listeners to know, is that if that's where you are and that's serving you and that's part of this transition, that's amazing. Just know there's another chapter, and don't stop there, because getting to that last chapter will be the best immunization for future disordered relationship with exercise.
Yeah, and for one, I loved how the devil's advocate side of things played out, because I guess we'll jump back to that, because I think that's a really important thing too. Once you are more advanced in your movement recovery journey and you are fueled well, you are rested well, and it could be Monday yoga and you're just like buzzing, so excited. I feel like going for a run. I feel like doing a HIIT class, and it's such a like unique feeling. It's not prompted by a friend or family member or an expectation. It's literally like there's a flame in you and you just can't wait. But that's as you said, it's like these things happen over time and do take practice. And sometimes, which again, I love that you touched on, because I find that it's a really common conversation that comes up with some of the women I work with, is that it's very much promoted eating disorder recovery, exercise addiction, compulsive exercise, this idea of just be free, just be impromptu, be on the spot, be spontaneous. But sometimes, most of the time, we actually need structure to get there, because all we know is this autopilot behavior, thought loop, routine, rule, whichever avenue you want to look at it, that, as you said, if you were going to go by intuition, your intuition could loop you back to your autopilot mode, because it's not because that's exactly what you think, feel, or need, but at this moment, that's all you know, because that's all you've been doing for the past few weeks, months, years. So that idea of just go with it, and I love to use the example, and I'd like to hear your take on it too, is we've all been in that situation where we're driving home from work, we've done 1,001 times that we're exhausted or something's on our mind, and we pull up in our driveway and go, wow, how the heck did I get here? Did I go through a red light? Did I stop at a stop sign? Did I run somewhat? And it's a little bit scary, because it's like, how was I driving a vehicle and I've got no perception of, like, clearly I'm okay, I pulled up in my driveway, but what happened? And our eating and exercise behaviors can be much the same, which is, even though we're relaxed and we've set this like, oh, I feel so good, I'm energized, I'm going with the flow, it can be smoke and mirrors, because it's literally your brain being like, hey, I know this. I got you, girl. I got you, guy, whatever. But it's literally autopilot mode. And that, I guess, to break free of the autopilot is offerings of other opportunities. And as you said, like inviting it in with curiosity. Let's experiment. Let's just have a peek. What's that look like? What's it feel like? What's it taste like if it was to be food? And rather than extracting everything as wrong, right, good, bad, we're just curious. There's no like category that it's going to fit into. And I think some of that is the healing process, starting to be receptive and open to, as you sort of said, just data. like what's happening throughout the day and what do I want to observe about that?
Absolutely. So the pull of like that sort of tidal rip into what's known is so powerful, that wanting to give enough space for intuition to play out, but also being aware that we're most likely to fall into what we've done before. We're most likely to fall into habits, and movement, food, body stuff is so heavily encoded in our subconscious with the society that we live in. It's so likely that when our eyes are closed, something's going to be puppeted for us. Something will be taken out of our discernment and seem like a good idea, and in hindsight we'll be able to recognize, oh, that was just the wolf in sheep's clothing, that was just the same thing in a different outfit. So again, there's not sort of putting this huge standard on like seeing through to the core truth of everything that we're doing, but just being open and not being careful about assumptions in any direction. Because part of what I wanted to talk about today was, for some people, recovering from compulsive exercise can flip into a movement avoidance, and they can get stuck in this space. There's this idea of the anti-eating disorder people might have heard of, where if, say, you've been through a restriction and you come to understand that that's the case and you're working on eating recovery, sometimes as you step into intuitive eating, there's an overcompensation for the fear of restricting again. And so people might be more likely to push themselves to eat additionally, or if they're not, like, say they're offered something that might have been a food that was a fear food in the past, and they feel like their intuition's actually saying that they really don't feel like it right then and there, but there's a voice of doubt that says, if you don't accept that, that's restrictive.
You have to challenge it.
You have to, challenge, exactly. And we certainly indoctrinate people with that at a certain point in this process. So it's like, how do you find your feet with that again? Because intuitive eating theory would suggest there'll be sometimes you don't want any kind of food. There'll be sometimes you, it is the intuitive alignment to your body's needs to have less on some days and some moments or some meals, because that's all your body needs. So it's not always the correction to override it would keep us stuck in not trusting ourselves, which is, again, it's just capping the potential of where this can go. And with movement, that's what it tends to look like, is that we get scared of moving at all, or we think that if it's not like a restorative yoga or something really slow or a slow walk, we just like not touching it, because who knows where that can go.
I'm scared. Yeah. I don't want to relive what I've already lived. Like, once was enough. And look, honestly, I say this as a place of, I feel like I'm still actively navigating some of those, because I guess on the autopilot loop, so I'm only sharing this because I feel like so many women will feel the same way, is that I'm so confident with where I'm at right now that sometimes I accidentally slip back into just doing a little bit too much. And that comes not from a bad place. Like, I legitimately just love to train and have fun and all that sort of thing. But sometimes I get sort of too excited, and I can feel that sort of kick back in. And I guess that's where the awareness kicks in, where it's like, oh, hang on, we know that we need to be a little bit more moderate. And it's quite easy for me to navigate that now, because I've got, I guess, the tools in the toolbox to be like, oh, I know you're having fun and you're excited, but there is a way to care for yourself, which could be increasing snacks or intentionally having a rest day despite how excited you are, or things like that. But for me, it feels really fun and playful. But I do recall a time before where I'm at right now, which was, I guess, how we said before, you might have that flame of, I really feel like doing something high intensity. And it's like, oh, but can my body handle it? Like, my heart rate's going to be high for a little while, not too long, only 20 minutes, maybe 30. That's not too long. I know 20. And then you start to go in this incredible dialogue. And because, a lot of us have been health conscious for quite some time, we've got this really good amount of evidence to support both. So part of me is going, yeah, but raising your heart rate's good for your cardiovascular health. It's good for this, it's good for that. And then there's this other one going, oh, but cortisol and stress response and adrenal fatigue and loss of, and they both raised some incredible points. And there was some times where it was almost like a short circuit would happen and be like, I'm not doing it. Because I just, it's too hard. I can't tell what is wrong, what is right. But then over time, not even actually, it was again awareness. As soon as I was like, hang on, what's going on here? Like, why is this such a difficult decision? It shouldn't be that difficult. And sort of delved into that, then I was able to, I guess, pull in more logic and go, well, you're not the identity you were when you were making the decisions to step away from HIIT workouts, to step away from 10 training sessions a week, and I think that's sometimes what happens. We get a bit lost in which hat we're wearing. And it's like, no, you need to trust now that you are this person who's very well aware and very well equipped to make decisions. And if you've got that impromptu voice going, hey, it feels like a good day for a run, and there's no attachments to that, you're not trying to prove anything, you're not trying to avoid anything, it's just like something fun and exciting, that you can trust that. And then I guess the confidence comes from seeing the outcome, which in my scenario was, oh, well, my cycle still showed up. And I also didn't go down this rabbit hole of now I've got to run 10 times a week. It was just one run and it was fun and I really liked it. And the next time I feel like it, I'll do it again. But there was definitely transitions of, oh my gosh, I just shouldn't do it, I'm scared. And I think that's, that avoidance of movement needs just as much awareness as working out intuitive movement, because it would have been very easy for me to be in that scenario and just go, this is too hard to work out, I surrender, like I'm just not doing it. And not surrender in a good way, as in I'm open to options, as in it's too hard, I'm frazzled, I'm not going to do it, which isn't a nice relationship either, especially if you genuinely love movement, because suddenly you're living at a loss, because it's like you're longing for something. I want to go for a run. Maybe I want to lift some weights. Maybe I do want to do yoga, whichever level of intensity spectrum it is. But I guess if anyone's listening and they're in that position where, all right, I'm recovered, but I'm lost now because I know what not to do on both levels. I know that I shouldn't do too much, and I know I don't want to do this little, but I'm so scared to fall into my old identity, even though I've come so far that I'm not that person anymore. It gets so messy. How do we navigate this?
It's so messy, and it's like so many things that good stuff comes out of the mess. Trust the mess. I think there's something in particular about exercise with this, because somatic triggers can be so intense, like the feeling of having your heart rate up again, the feeling of like the taste in your mouth after you've exercised, the smell of a gym, it's so visceral, like, but of course it's visceral. And so the way that can pull you into someone was saying to me recently, like when they even put on Lululemon, they become a different person. It's like this old version of them goes, okay, we're going to do this. I'm here. She wakes up, and it's like, how do you, because to speak to what you were saying about the different hats, it's like, if you don't, I really loved the way you were putting that around, I'm not that identity that had to make this choice at this time. I'm me now, here doing this. And if she doesn't get a chance to do that, I never get to be her. If we don't get to practice that new identity, to practice that new way of being in the world and relating, maybe it's clunky, maybe we get it wrong, in inverted commas, a few times, but if we don't have the opportunity to experiment, then we can kind of only recycle the versions of us that we've done so far. And so to bring in like willingness to give that different way of doing it a try, and just let that become a more normal, that eventually that becomes the most wonderful autopilot to be on, because your standard, your familiarity is with feeling really good and connected into yourself. And when that isn't the case, things feel off. When that isn't the case, alarm bells go off because you don't feel embodied, you don't feel connected, you can't hear your intuition. That's a bad day, and that's sort of what raises your attention, rather than any multiple versions of the opposite of that. So I think knowing that it's so very normal to be triggered in a whole new way when it comes to exercise is important. There's a lot going on hormonally, biochemically, neurologically, when all this stuff is happening in our body, that can be really evocative of the past, that can trigger old memories, it's almost like that older version of us starts moving our body for us. And I think you could be playful with that too, and almost say, well, how does this version of me run? Like, maybe she has a little bit more softness in the way she moves her hips in this run. Maybe it's a bit less angular. Maybe it's even trying, like, going on a different route, like seeing something different, just changing it up a little bit, noticing maybe this version of me does different stretches afterwards, or she drinks something different, or it's ways of re-imprinting that experience with a new way of being. And the idea equally so with intuitive eating, if we were to want to eventually be able to trust the times that we don't feel like eating as much, or we don't feel like taking the offering of something that may have once been a fear food, and trusting that at this point in time that's coming from a really healthy place, like a trustworthy, soulful place. With the movement avoidance, it can be helpful to start to play with what I sometimes call loving self-discipline, because that word discipline is so loaded as well, and I want to be careful with that. But I think it's loaded because it's been misused or misunderstood in many ways as something punitive and aggressive and cruel, and it doesn't have to be. The meaning of it is more about structure and containment, and that can be, it's neutral. It depends on the intention of how it's used. It can certainly be punitive, it can certainly be destructive, but then it can also be quite liberating, and it can be necessary to liberate somebody. Like you were saying before, like, structure can actually facilitate change. It can be the best, safest way of doing that. So it might be, in times, if it's become a new pattern, or you've been in avoidance for a while, where you feel like, well, I do feel tired, and I think, so I shouldn't go for a walk, I shouldn't do that, and I'm going to do this other thing instead that I've been doing, when I watch TV or spend time with my partner, or because that's probably a better thing to do. At some point along the way, it might be worth trying, well, what if I did just move a little bit and see what that felt like? What if I did bring that online again, so that it just becomes an option, and it's like, it doesn't become a defunct expression of the optionality in how we experience the world and what's available for us. And we can test out how we go with it, and we can respond to that from that place that we now are coming into.
Yeah, so I guess in the nutshell, it's inviting in that curiosity again, and not having, I guess, this expectation of needing to get it right. Like, drawing upon that example you just said, I'm feeling a little bit tired, maybe I'll just watch Netflix with my partner, but if you don't know what it feels like to go for the walk, you don't actually know if that is the best decision. But if you're looking at it from a curious mind, or an experiment, or just outcome focused, by going on the walk, you've got more data to come back and go, oh, you know what, I wasn't sure if that was going to be a good idea. It turns out that it is. So the next time a similar scenario presents itself, the idea of going for the walk isn't going to seem so, I guess, daunting, because, okay, while the evidence suggests that the last time I felt like this, the walk was actually nice. And of course, if it's pouring down rain or whatever else, and it's like, well, no, today really is Netflix. But knowing that just because the evidence last time said that was a good decision doesn't now make it a rule. Because I think sometimes that's where it can get sticky, is because we, to a degree, we love programming and structure, and it's being open and receptive to, as you said, it's just knowing that we've got choices. So when I'm this energy level or this mood, sometimes Netflix is good, sometimes a walk is good, sometimes, I don't know, playing badminton is good. It's a higher intensity, but maybe it's fun and with your friends. So despite the intensity being higher than the other two activities listed, the joy you get from being with your friends could be exactly what you need to satisfy how you're feeling at the time you make that decision. So I guess to anyone who's in that avoidance phase, there may be some ways that you can look at making your decisions, just keeping a little bit of a journal or a diary that's more like, I finish work and maybe my energy's in a 6 out of 10, but a walk feels really good for a 6 out of 10. And again, we're not creating a rule with it. It's just that if then you've got some evidence behind you and you are feeling stuck, you can kind of go, you know what, I've made some pretty good decisions in the past. It turns out that when I chose to do this or I chose to do that, I really liked it. And the intention behind it was a good one. Where let's say you have one day where you're a bit frazzled and you've got the decision to chill and watch Netflix, you've got the decision to go for a walk, you've got the decision to go do a HIIT workout, and that autopilot does kick in, but you're well aware that you're exhausted, but you go do the HIIT workout and then you come home and you're even more exhausted. You haven't failed. It's not wrong, but at least you can go, oh, you know what? When I feel frazzled, I used to think that made me feel better. I know better now. And all that, I'm not even going to call a misstep. All that decision did was consolidate that you actually know better now. And therefore, when it presents itself again, you're going to have more confidence to go, oh, you know what? The HIIT workout's never a good idea when I feel like this, right? And that's okay. But the more you practice that and explore it, the more confidence you're going to get, I guess, with that intuitive feeling of, okay, I have options and now I'm going to lean towards this because it feels good, it feels right. And I actually feel confident to make that choice because I'm not trying to, I guess, relating it back to like recovery stage, I'm not trying to prove that I cannot do a HIIT workout. You're literally just choosing to go for a walk because that feels like the best decision for you right now in this moment.
That's such a treasure. I think it's such a wonderful thing to mention because it's the first thing so many of our brains would do. Would be like, right, so 6 out of 10 equals go for a walk. And we can make a little booklet that we can refer to for future. And I think as well, like when you were saying it's not a failure because the weighting that we can put in it, because it's probably true that sometimes nothing would have felt good. Like we were just in a place where if we stayed home and watched Netflix, if we went for a walk, we called a friend, we were just not going to have a good night, and not sort of blaming that wrong choice, I got it wrong, or I wasn't it must have been an eating disorder thought, or it must have been doing this or that it really is just, and again, I like to bring it back to that relationship model. If you had a friend with you and maybe they were having a hard day, or you were like really trying to like pep them up a little bit, or you're trying to make them feel supported, or you're kind of offering different things, and you left that exchange and sort of thought, I'm not sure I was really helpful, I'm not sure I made them feel better. That doesn't make you a bad friend. It doesn't mean the friendship's going to end. It doesn't mean anything really. Is that maybe there was nothing you could have said in that interaction that would have made them feel better. Maybe that's not what they needed. Maybe that wasn't what that time was about. And it could be a whole other conversation we go to it at a different time, but I think it speaks to our allergy to difficult feelings and our social assumptions that it was a wrong choice if it's left us with a less desirable feeling, that there's room and acceptance and welcoming of evenings of feeling sad or tired, or that's not something that we're trying to escape from or fix.
Well, and that's such another integral part, I guess, of this conversation that, easily sort of could have been swept over if I was left to my own demise talking about it. Because, that idea of you get some evidence behind you to be like, I'm confident with these decisions, that's a big sinking point of that objective, that idea is that if you're not paying attention to your emotional state and whatever caused it, you're not going to be accommodating to the fact that sometimes we need to be sad for a little bit, right? It's the only way to not feel sad anymore is to have some processing time to think something through, see how something might play out, think of a new outcome. And if we're purely going by, let's say, data, is, so to a degree, it's like, well, in the right time, sometimes that process is helpful. But in certain times, really, it's got nothing to even do with the exercise, but knowing the mood I'm in right now, what I'm experiencing in this moment, is it something that perhaps literally just some time to process is going to help me through more than any form of physical movement or watching TV? Do I need to call my best friend? Do I need to speak to my therapist or my coach? Or do I need to just pick up a pen and paper and write all my thoughts out? And even though none of those activities are exercise based, it does all fit into that intuitive movement idea, because that's the intuition. It's knowing that this is a good idea to get outdoors or move or get my heart rate up or stretch. Or is it a good idea to just sit with myself and not talk to anybody? Maybe I just need to have a think and sort out these webs. And I guess knowing that, finding intuitive movement or finding even intuitive eating, sometimes it's not about the movement and it's not about the eating. It's also knowing when's the right time to just sit with the emotion and navigate it and potentially feel it even more than what you're currently feeling. Because sometimes the only way out is in. Well, not it's sometimes, like all of the time, really. Let's be honest. Safe bet. Yeah. But that's that's where your power is coming from. That I've heard the term before, like emotional fitness almost. It's like knowing even just how to identify the emotion that you're feeling. Like if you're feeling grief, as an example, it's such an extreme emotion. Your run's not going to fix that or make you feel better or uplift you. Sometimes it is having conversations that are difficult or processing or writing things down. But if you're more, I've been sitting at my desk all day, I'm in a bit of a rut, not because I'm mentally stressed, I'm so sick of sitting, then yes, that walk is such a wonderful idea. But that's how many moving parts there are. And that's why just saying to someone, just move intuitively. It's important. Like it's not, it's more than that. And having someone to guide you through those stages can be so helpful for that very reason, that they can help you see things that you might not see because your awareness hasn't been brought to it yet.
So beautifully said. Yes.
Oh, Jacqueline, our time has come to an end and I can't believe it because it's gone so fast, but I feel like we could talk for hours on end. But for now, thank you so much for coming on and having a chat and talking about intuitive movement and exercise avoidance and all these important topics. As always, you bring some incredible points to the forefront and your wealth of knowledge just shines through every single time we chat. So thank you so much for bringing that to our listeners today.
Thank you, Jade. It's such a pleasure.
Thank you so much for listening in on today's episode. I hope you absolutely loved it. If you would like to support the channel, you could subscribe, leave comments, or share the episode with a friend who you think would enjoy it. As always, I'm so glad to have you listening in with us, and I hope that you join us for the next episode.